All right. It looks like everything's all set. We're here. We're ready to go. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. You're coming through loud and clear, which is great because we spent a good 20 minutes making sure the audio is clear. So I hope all the listeners out there are hearing us five by five. Please let us know. Yeah, it's good to have you back, man. It's been a spell, but you've had some interesting events, some fun opportunities. So that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, I have this. It's been fun.
It has been fun. So, um, let me just see here. I think this is officially your sixth time on the show.
Yeah, I think so. I think
Which,
so.
yeah, you're one of the Sixers.
I, I joined the Sixer Club.
You joined the Sixer Club, yeah. Um, yeah. So, we've got an interesting one today for those you are unaware. Like this is episode 41. Done 41 weeks straight of this show, this time slot with only one recorded one that premiered. And this is also the start in Canada for our Harvest Thanksgiving weekend. So you guys have yours in November, because I guess it's warmer. It's warmer in the south, so the harvest comes later.
Yeah.
Ours is like now. So yeah, all the preps are coming up for that. So yeah, so I was able to squeeze this in without having to rearrange anything, and I'm so happy that we got you here tonight to discuss the script.
Yeah, glad to be here anytime.
And yeah, looks like we're coming through five by five, which is awesome. So this is an interesting one. So let's get underway. Welcome to Scripts on Saturdays, the only screenplay review show on the interwebs, discussing scripts both professional and amateur, circulating around Hollywood, giving you, the TV and movie-going audience, a behind-the-scenes and inside track on what writers are pushing and what producers are buying. I'm your host, the Script Doctor, and joining me this week is Jake of 52 Movies a Year, six times. We've got a number of people in six times. You get to join that group. How you doing, buddy? Glad to have you back.
I'm doing good. I'm just waiting for my six-time jacket.
Yeah, I would love to get some merch on that. That'd be awesome.
Like Saturday Night Live did a
Yeah,
skit
well they
on
got
them.
they got the jackets, they got the robes, they got the
Yep.
whole kit and caboodle. That they also have a ton of money.
Oh yeah,
but
that helps.
but yeah, like it's great. And this week we got a very interesting script. It's called Sea Dogs, and it placed 38 on the 2023 blacklist. It's written by Josh Woolf with two O's, and it got to place 38 with the same amount of votes as last week's script, 11. And it's like, wow, that's a huge distance because I think last week was like in the 40s. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy. But Jake, please share with us, what is the log line for Sea Dogs?
After two down on their luck, lobster fishermen botch a hijacking attempt on the high seas. They are forced to confront the consequences of their actions as they struggle to navigate a world they no longer recognize.
Yeah, the synopsis is as follows. Dennis Kelly, a down on his luck fisherman, and Nick Silva, an ex con with nothing to lose, hatch a daring plan to hijack a cargo ship off the North Atlantic coast. With everything on the line, they take the crew hostage, hoping for a multi-million-dollar ransom. But as tension mounts and their own past catches up to them, the men find themselves in over their heads. Will this be their ticket out, or will the ocean claim their lives? This is a gritty tale of desperation, danger, and the ultimate gamble for survival. So this script was a lot longer than I expected, and when I initially read the log line, this kind of felt like it was still part of like a spooky theme to it because they have these unintended consequences, changing of their lives, and I'm thinking, okay, this might fit in line with the season, the Halloween season, because we've had a couple of thrillers, horrors,
Yeah.
scripts so far. And I'm not gonna lie, I was a little disappointed this wasn't going in the supernatural area. What were your thoughts, Jake?
Yeah, there was nothing supernatural. It kind of felt like um, just a kind of I don't even know what genre it fits in. The bad to worse
Yeah, it's definitely a tragedy. I
scenario,
would say part of a tragedy.
tragedy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I don't know. That's kind of that's like not a seasonal movie. Like, oh, there's a time of the year that these movies come out. They're kind of hit and miss based on how well they're made and who's in them, I guess.
I don't disagree with that, because I was reading this along and I'm thinking, okay, this is kind of a this is kind of like a Shakespearean or Greek tragedy of sorts. Um, I was really shocked at how many characters there are in this script. I think it's like 12. Like, there's a lot of names to try and remember.
Yeah, and that was hard. The first 5 pages I had to keep reading because there was so much description,
Hmm.
which I didn't think was bad, but I couldn't relate names to characters and what they were doing. I had to reread that and start over a couple of times to actually go, this is this person. I knew it. I had a picture in my head of what was happening, and I
Yeah.
thought that was actually described a very visual. It'd be interesting to see visually, but
Well,
it didn't help
I would
get
say,
the characters down.
yeah, I would say the benefit with regards to this script is that the prose, the way that he describes the actions are quite vivid. Like, he paints a picture in your head quite vividly. Um,
Yes.
it's just we get thrown all these characters so quickly, right, one right after the other. You're not able to kind of associate the character with their position in the story right away. Like, it takes, at least for me, it took around 25 pages before I started figuring out, like, who's the main character really of this script, right?
Yes. And actually, as I read from Beyond 25, I also thought maybe some of these people would be were they supposed to be the protagonist? You know, some people introduced at the end that
Hmm.
had such an impact on it that you're like, well, they're kind of more than just somebody there to further or just an obstacle, for the main character to. They were interesting characters,
Oh,
but
yeah.
yeah, the way they came in. So, I mean, I'm kind of on the fence either way. Some parts I thought was really interesting and helped it flow, and then other parts I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to go back and reread that because I'm not sure what I got.
Yeah, I was also like, I've mentioned this is one of my pet peeves. Anyone following the show knows this. I don't like flashbacks, and
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 that's yeah,
this script does at least 5 or 6 of them, because we start off in something quite interesting. So we've got this massive 1,000 foot long Panamax class container ship, right, going heading towards the Northwest Passage. And if you don't know, out there listening, the Northwest Passage. So the Northwest Passage is part of the Atlantic Ocean, going between Canada and Greenland, north of Banff Island. And they travel through the northwest, what's called the Northwest Passage, a whole bunch of islands and stuff, by Victoria Island, and heading towards Alaska, through the Bering Sea, and then you travel either north to Russia, or you travel a little bit south and you go reach China. And this was the other way to get from the Atlantic to the Pacific before the Panama Canal was done, and it's still a route that's used today. It's a dangerous route because there's a lot of ice up there, and you need icebreakers and heavy ships. But this is like the introduction of this script. Is like, we got this big cargo container ship heading north towards doing this. So they're kind of just in the waters between Cape Cod and Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick and all that, and those provinces. So it's not quite international waters, but it's waters with a shared border. And while the captain is, doing his stuff, they see a flare, and then they see a raft and 2 people in survival suits, like, waving them down, desperate for help. So they do what all good captains do, is like, okay, let's pick up these guys, and we'll send out an alert. And because they're right on the border, whatever Coast Guard from, whether it's Canada or the U.S., gets the call first and response first, they're the ones that'll take care of these two survivors. And I was like, oh, this is a pretty decent setup. So, okay, cool. We got some action. We got some stakes here. These 2 characters. We don't know them yet, but we empathize with them on a raft in survival suits. So clearly something has happened. And then as the captain says his order, he starts heading down to the loading area. His crew is all in a panic because these 2 passengers, these 2 people that they've saved, have guns on them, and they're holding the crew hostage. and I was like, well, that's kind of new. You don't really see that in North America.
Yeah,
Yeah. What was going through your head when you were reading that, Jake?
well, so I've got some strong feelings on the flashbacks, but I think that's going to come back and forth a little bit as the script goes.
Yeah.
So, I liked the setup. Yeah, I don't know anything about the route or anything like that, but I felt like the script itself described it, made it feel like it's this writer had knowledge of it, or at least they use such colorful language. You could see yourself in the sea. You could almost sympathize with if I was out on a raft. And then yeah, that turned into robbery. I was like, oh, you got me. You hooked me.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, that big ask at the beginning of every writer has a big ask.
Right.
And I'm sitting there thinking, to me, I go, well, maybe that was the flashback. So I'm like, okay, as long as this is worth it. That's kind of how I look at a lot of reading these or even watching a movie. Okay, I'll put up with this change in story pace as long as it's worth it.
Right.
And I'm like, sounds, you got something great going on right here.
Oh yeah, it's like this
I'm
is a setup.
excited to see what I want to see it explained.
Yeah, like this is a strong setup, and you're like, okay, you got me hooked. Can you stick the landing?
Yep.
And as soon as we get to that hook part, the writer does, we're going to Nantucket Sound 7 days earlier. And I'm like, no, no, son of a gun, don't do that to me. I don't care what happened a week ago.
Yeah, and if you do that, it better be worth it. It better be, I needed to know this. And I'm glad. Yeah. I'm glad you pulled me out of that action to show me this because it was worth it.
Yes, it's like that's the last question, right? It's like, can you do this? And so we now have, for the next few pages, sadly, we now have no idea who these two gunmen are, because we're introduced to Dennis Kelly, Nick Silva, Tim Shaw, and Mel Loughride, and
yeah,
all like really like right after the next. So it's like, okay, we have four guys. Which of these four guys is the two gunmen that are on the boat? Like, we don't know yet, because they all work. Like Tim, he's Coast Guard, but he also pays attention to the lobster fishers and all the other fishermen. Mel is kind of like a bar owner, and he owns a boat as well. So is he also one of the fishermen too? Like, because we know the logline says two fishermen or two lobster fishermen, and then you got Nick, who he's a deckhand, but he's also a fisherman. Like, we just don't know yet, so it's all over the place. But we have this boat called the Edna Rose. This is a family boat for for Dennis. Keep wanting to call him Dick because, well, let's not Dennis so much spoilers. He is a dick. He
is a dick.
And yeah, so we just see their day. Like, they Dennis and Nick, they're two guys on a boat. It's Dennis's boat, the Edna Rose, and they lay lobster traps, and then they go, hopefully catch lobsters and bring them up and sell them at port. And they're go ahead.
Oh, I liked how while they were describing, I caught it on the second read, he wasn't keeping every lobster. He had to measure, and some he had to reluctantly put back.
Yeah.
And that kind of stayed with me on the second read, but it kind of more ties into the end, an opinion I have. So, and I thought, okay, it is specific lobsters in this particular. It isn't just that they're fishermen. It isn't just, because they could just be fishermen.
Right.
They could just be anything. And maybe that stuck with me because I had read it through and then I picked it up. And maybe, is this meant to be something more than it's not? Some stay, some make it, some don't.
Exactly.
Some of the lobsters, not like they want to be picked, but, and then, it is important. All that effort doesn't pay off. Always.
Exactly. And you kind of learn something from that action, is that they get paid by the pound. It's not like, oh, you get paid by the lobster. It's just like with shrimp fishing or mackerel fishing for mackerel, catfish, what have you. The heavier the fish, more value it's got, because you can serve more people with one than you can with many.
Yep.
And I appreciated that, because it's like, oh, you tell me so much just by that action of, oh, we got two lobsters. One is of a good size that he's able to keep. The other is too small, so he throws it back. I mean, and you know why he throws it back? Because it might grow bigger in the next couple of weeks. Maybe he'll catch it again, and whatever, he'll catch something else. But there's a conflict in this town, and that is that there's some other shipping lanes that have kind of occupied. New shipping lanes have been brought into the area, and it's prohibiting a lot of the fishermen from being able to fish in that area because that's where the fish are, and they can't go there because it's not safe because all these freighters are coming through to transport goods, and so their town is struggling. And Dennis is one of these guys who we learned pretty quick he never wanted to be a fisherman, especially a lobster fisherman. But he's going out every day, catching what he can, making whatever money he can. But we get this great character moment where we find out that he hasn't been able to pay Nick for a while after he sells the catch, and that's because he gambles it away.
Yeah, and I actually didn't catch the buy-in the first time I read it. The second time I read it, and so I like that better that they at least mentioned it in that first little exchange. I thought that exchange with Dennis, Mel, and Nick really set up a lot on their character. Mel doesn't like Nick.
Right.
You get that just from the dialogue, but you find out later why. But the dialogue was clear, just his impatience towards him, and you could tell he cared for, he's got a relationship with Dennis.
Yes.
But he doesn't want to deal with Nick, and he's blunt with him about it. And I thought that was really good, and I was like, okay, I want to know why. Because we don't know anything about Nick yet. We don't know anything really about Dennis other than they're down on their luck and working as hard as they can.
Exactly. And what we do learn about Nick comes through Mel, because Mel's judging Dennis for hiring Nick because Nick's got this reputation of being an ex-convict. And Mel doesn't like, those types of people in his town. And
Yep.
Dennis is like, what else do I have? No one else is working for me. People are selling their boats. They're leaving town because they can't make ends meet. Dennis is in the hole. He's indebted to Mel. Like we find out how much money later on, but he's indebted to him for a while. He hasn't been paying his bills, and it's tough on him. But he's not sympathetic because when he does sell the stuff, he goes to a poker game that Mel runs.
Yeah,
and he gambles it all. Like he loses every time. Like this Dennis character is really like someone you don't want to root for because he's making obvious mistakes that are always just digging him deeper into the hole, as opposed to a character who he's doing everything right, but the world keeps knocking him down.
Yeah. You feel bad for Nick because you're almost going, the only job he can get as the next con
right
is working for Dennis. And he's not getting the, and so you're like, oh man, he's not getting paid. Dennis is the author of his own struggles, but still that sucks to be in, so you can at least go, well, you're doing it to yourself, but I feel for you.
Well, that's true, but that's what made me kind of like Nick right off the bat, because here's this guy, he works out a lot, he's got this reputation of being an ex-con, almost everyone in town avoids him. He's got a girlfriend, this Julie girl, who he's her rock. Like she needs him a lot, and I like the relationship, but she's also she doesn't take any guff. Like when she brings up like, hey, you've been working for this guy for months, and I'm still the one paying the rent, paying the bills. Where's the money coming in? And Nick just has to talk around it because he doesn't want to, reveal the truth that he's too concerned about his reputation and the job he has with Dennis to question him strongly about getting paid.
Yeah.
Because I think it's set up pretty clearly that if he were to talk back strongly enough to Dennis would just fire him, and then he's got nothing.
Yeah.
And
so at that moment I was going, okay, Nick's the protagonist, our protagonist here.
Yeah, I was thinking
Dennis'
that.
Story, or is it Nick's?
Yeah, like that's the thing. It's like, is it is it Nick's or I'm not sure, or maybe it was Tim. So Tim's the Coast Guard, right?
And
Or Harborfront. He's not Coast Guard. He's with Harborfront, and he's got to deal with this jerk yachting guy who
yeah,
keeps on bringing all these women over, and he's you know loud. No, he's got his the stereo is too loud, so it's violating the airspace regulations with noise and all that stuff. So he's like, "This is the fine, it's 250," and the guy just throws money at him, and it just falls into the water.
yes.
And Tim just kind of backs down from that. He's like, that's all he can do.
Yeah, he just says, just keep it down and drives away. I thought that was interesting because from one perspective, you could just go, he's interacting with somebody who's acting entitled,
Hmm.
throwing money at him, used to people just giving him his way, and all he does is say, just keep it down, and he ignores the money. And I took it as he's a guy who's like, yeah, I'm not gonna, I gain nothing by pushing this harder.
Yeah.
Just you know, I've sent my message. But the line that says he motors away, tail between his legs, I didn't like that line because I'm like, I didn't think Tim did anything wrong. Why is he motoring? He just did his job. What was he supposed to do? Pull out a gun and shoot him? Arrest
Yeah.
him?
Like he doesn't
That's his
have that
job.
authority. Like he has very little authority over here. He's essentially only able to observe, report, and maybe write a ticket. He can't arrest
Yeah,
anybody.
he handled himself the best he could. It's not like I didn't think he had, it was meant to be humiliating. I get that.
Hmm.
But I think it was only that way because that's how they wanted to write it. So I was like, okay, all right, it better be worth it again, you know? There's got to be a reason this guy's got to be like that. That kept coming up a lot with me. Okay,
Yeah.
fine. I'm here. Let's see.
And sadly, we don't get to spend any more time on that because we then jump back to the present where they're back on the ship, the freighter, and now we know. Oh, Nick is the one who's leading this. He's the first one, and then we learn it's Dennis is with them. So now we know it's Dennis and Nick doing this. Dennis clearly doesn't know what he's doing here, so he's got Nick leading the charge. And the
Yeah.
captain is just trying. The captain's from Denmark, so he speaks English, but not well. And basically, he's calm in this situation, and Nick and Dennis are panicked, and they're basically saying like, "Get the company man on the phone. This is our demands. We want like $25 million. We want it paid now." And the captain's like, "Well, it's gonna take some time. Like, it's not like even when we call them, we can only leave a message until they call back, and we got to wait for that." And this is, of course, driving both Dennis and Nick crazy because you get this sense that they don't want to be here very long because it's not to their advantage, right? Especially when they're so close to both Canada and the United States still at this point. Coast Guard, Navy could come by and
Yeah.
inquire, "Hey, what's going on? Why haven't you guys been moving your boat? Why isn't the boat moving?" After several hours.
Yes. And yeah, there's a lot of technology involved that would know. It's not like time is definitely of the essence.
Exactly, and remember, a freighter ship they're on a schedule, so their whole goal is to try and show up right on time. They can't show up too early because the docks might not be cleared for them, and they can't show up too late because people are expecting those supplies. So
Yep.
yeah, everything is very precisely timed. And then even as we get to this escalating point where we get the first hiccup in Nick and Dennis's plan, which is that they got to now wait for essentially head office to get back to the boat,
Yeah.
to the phone call. We then we go back another 7 days, and it's like, okay, now we're introducing more characters. Now we meet Kelly, which is not Kelly. We meet Laurel,
Well, yeah.
Dennis's wife, who's a school teacher, but she's stuck kind of working at a daycare because Dennis is too ego driven to let her take a job that she's qualified for that pays more to help out with their bills. He's of the mindset that he can take care of this family while he's spending all of his money on alcohol and gambling.
And that's another point. Okay, they was very clear about she could have another job. He lost a job. And at that moment I paid attention to it the first time. I was like, okay. Because I was still invested and I'm like, okay, this better be worth it. That
Hmm.
he again, this is like they've set up stuff that I'm expecting to feel some sort of payoff or go, I understand why, or I can sympathize with what your situation. So, and all of these things are just kind of stacking up as I'm reading it. And if I was watching it, it'd be the same thing. I'd be going, okay, I'm still going. I'm still going. Let's, you can flash back and forth a couple more times if you want to. Just show me what I need to know.
Right.
You've touched on these items very clearly. It's not like they were accidental. So I'm like, okay, we're gonna pay these off.
We are, and that's what this entire flashback really was. It was primarily just that. It was the scene of the women in these two characters' lives. So the first is Laurel finding out that she just wants to contribute because, times are tough. Like the fishing is not performing the way they need it to. So a real man would be like, okay, if this is, I'm going to, I'm here to take care of you, but it's not working out. Maybe I'll get a night job. Maybe you pick up that teaching gig. We figure this stuff out until we can get, better situated, and then we can make another decision once there's less stress going around, right? Dennis isn't like that at all. He's like, to heck with that. You're staying at the daycare, making pennies on the doll, making pennies, and I'm gonna figure out a way, a magical get quick rich scheme to solve all our problems in one go. Like that's exactly what his mindset is.
Yeah, and that's the benefit of the flashback. We're now attributing motive to his words, where if it was linear, we would just know a guy's down on his luck and he's got pride, whether it's, false pride or, stubborn pride or, I can do this,
Right.
So now we're like, okay, now I know what it's leading to. So you're like, okay, what'd you think at that point? Were you like, was it worth it for the flashback?
No, not for me, because I like the build up, and essentially what we're seeing in the present part of the story on the boat is your second act at full steam ahead, and now we're stopping it to also pepper in the first act of the film, which is okay. Dennis is down on his luck. He's down by his own ignorance and his own arrogance too, because there's no reason for him to be spending every single dollar he makes selling the few lobsters he's able to catch at a poker game trying to win more money or get himself out of debt, because he's clearly bad at poker. He's clearly saving whatever money he has purely to get himself drunk. So that's not useful either. And he's clearly lying to his wife about things. I'm like, this is all going to come to the head. I want to see that build up so it can come to a head, especially when you're giving me some pretty interesting stakes with regards to how desperate he's going to be once we get to this position on the boat. And then you have Nick, who is a victim of Dennis's behavior, because he's no one's going to hire him. He doesn't talk about his past. He's got a girlfriend that he's living with, but he's unable to contribute to the support because his boss, who's basically spending all the money on booze and gambling, is not paying him. And he's stuck in a bind where he's like, if I lose that job, there's nothing for me here aside from Julie. And the worst part is that if a crime goes down, he's going to be the first suspect, whether he committed it or not. So
that's true.
He's stuck in this thing. And Julie's the one that, we get literally the same scene between Dennis and Laurel with Nick and Julie, only it's flipped around, where Julie's upset that she's supporting Nick, and Nick can't, admit that he's getting boned by Dennis.
It made you like the guys more after you met their wife and girlfriend,
especially Nick. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're going, there's a human side, and you're like, it makes you like them more. You're kind of borrowing credibility from their wives.
Exactly. And like they're in a fishing town, right? So there's not a whole lot of opportunity for work if that's your industry. And this is something that's all over on the Northeast coast, especially for fisheries. It's like, well, if the fish aren't mating as much and we're or if we're overfishing, worst case of that part, we're actually hurting our future if we can't find that balance. And in this case here, Dennis is the way that I see the plan is that Dennis is going after the very freighters that are coming through the waters that he's used to fishing in and costing him money, and he's going to go get it from them directly in one big chunk. Like that's his goal.
Yeah, and I was right on board, even though, normally we're like, robbery's bad, all this stuff. You're
Right.
like, okay, at least I can empathize with you. Yep. I
Yeah,
was like, okay, all right, I wouldn't have done it, but you're doing it. I can see why.
exactly. And what's kind of interesting is that you realize that the relationship is that Dennis is the guy in charge, and Nick is kind of he's not unwitting, but he's the reluctant party to associate
Yes.
with this, because when we do come back to the freighter ship and they're on board and the company man finally calls, Nick's the guy that's got to talk to him. And
Yeah.
we find out, well, why is the reason Nick is talking to him? Well, because he's the ex-con, so he clearly has experience with this type of stuff, or at least so Dennis presumes. And Nick lays it out. He's like, we want $25 million. Get it here. And the company man that's on the other phone is like, oh, yeah, yeah, okay, it's going to take maybe at least 24 hours. And Nick and Dennis are freaking out, like 24 hours. Like
That wasn't part of the plan.
that wasn't, not only is that not part of the plan, but 24 hours, that's more than enough time for the Navy, Coast Guard, everybody to come surround that ship and really prevent them from getting what they want.
Yes.
And of course Dennis starts to take charge here, and basically what he wants to know is like, okay, every single one of the crew, empty your wallets. And Nick is like, really? You're doing this? He's like, we got to leave with something. And then Dennis learns that there's a safe on board.
Yeah.
The captain tells him there's a safe, and Dennis is like, okay, take me to it, and empty it out. And we're gonna take this with us, and that's kind of where we're at for the bit. And then we jump back, instead of 7 days, we go back 6 days earlier, so we're getting closer to the day. And all it is it's just more and more of the same. It's like, yep, it's hard to fish out there. The Edna Rose is doing its thing. It's going out. There's college kids screwing around. The fishing is weak, and this is kind of where we get closer and closer to Dennis forming his problem as things are getting more difficult. Because then we just jump back to. This is the part, like, so between like pages 15 and like 40, we are bouncing back between past and present like really quickly. It's
that's where you lost my patience with it, and I'm reading it. I
yeah,
can
like
imagine watching it.
imagine you're getting like whiplash almost, because we
Yeah.
go to the past, we get this one little stuff here on their lobster fishing boat, then we go back to the captain's quarters in the freighter, and the captain is having trouble with the combination. He keeps stumbling it. The handle's not opening up. He's nervous. He's terrified. Dennis is literally pressing the gun barrel at the back of the captain's head, and Nick is trying not to answer the phone with the company man in charge, trying to sweat them out so that they work a little faster. But then he reluctantly answers it, and he finds out that, yep, there's people that have to file paperwork and get everything underway and get the money to them, and it's going to take time. And they're talking about, like, there's a maritime bureau in Kuala Lumpur. There's the other they have to speak with the captain to make sure that everyone is safe, but the captain's not there. He's in his quarters with the safe and with Dennis, and Nick doesn't know what to do. So what does he do? He sends another deckhand to go to Dennis and the captain and be like, just let him know that the company man is calling. And
At
it's
that
like
moment.
it's like
Sorry.
you just feel that this is. I mean, I appreciated the tone of this, because you can tell that nothing is going their way, and you're like, oh great, this is perfect. Always give obstacles to your main characters. Make sure nothing is easy for them. That's where the drama comes in. That's where the tension comes in.
Yes.
And then you break that by going back
To
6
slower
days,
pace.
6 days earlier now, and
Yes. See, and I'm thinking of that and going, yeah, I'm recognizing that, but I'm also going, and they started using visuals and words. Like, you might say one word at the end of the flash forward, and then say the same sentence with a different emotion on the flashback. That gives a good visual,
Mm-hmm.
but movies aren't just about visual. You've got to have the bones behind it to drive it. Yeah, that visual might, okay, fine, I'm breathing, I'm relaxing because it was tense.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm relaxed. It's almost like having jokes at the end of all your serious moments.
Yeah, it
And
just
when do I know
deflates.
when it takes anything serious?
Yeah, it deflates the tension. And this one here, the flashbacks kind of try to build up. I mean, we once the deckhand is sent to the captain's quarters to meet Dennis and the captain for let them know what the company man needs to talk to him and stuff. We jump back and we find out that other fishermen have their homes facing foreclosure because there's this company called the IMO, which I didn't research what that initialism stands for, but the context is as we mentioned earlier, the water with which these fishermen use to get their catch and make their living is reserved privately for shipping lanes, and the entire town and other regions are negotiating with this larger entity to try and find a balance so that they can maintain their living. And at the same time, they find out, oh, it's going to take like at least another 6 months of negotiations, which a lot of people can't hold on to. And then Mel, the old guy who doesn't like Nick, proposes to Dennis that, hey, I know a guy that runs a salvage yard. He might want to buy your boat. And you might have to sell it if you want to, make ends meet. And Dennis is like, I can't sell this. Not just for the fact that he wants the money, which he does. It's for the fact that he's not going to get the value for it. And on top of that, what is he going to do for work afterwards? Like he's got no prospects even if he sells the boat. He has better chance of making some money so long as he retains the boat than no money, certainly, after he sells it.
And see, this is where it started to shake apart for me. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, we know Dennis didn't want to be a fisherman. It told us that.
Yep.
We know Mel is a friend of his father, and Mel has at least the motive of, maybe he's not expressing it now, but he expresses it that, hey, you got to do what your dad wanted you to do. And that was kind of like, okay, but I don't know why.
Right.
But the things that we're knowing, I'm like, all right, well, the first thing I'm thinking of is, yeah, let your wife take that job, move somewhere else, go work a couple of jobs. Dig yourself out of a hole. Get out of there.
Yeah.
Take
Figure
take
something
that
out.
lifeline and go. And I'm sitting there going, okay, well, there better be a good reason. And I'm like, the more we learn, the more he hates it. And I'm like, okay, and so it started sending the seeds of doubt for me that I was like, okay, I like these characters. I feel exactly what you want me to feel, I think, but man, you're not making it any easier because I can't relate to them making the choices they're making.
Yeah, because they don't feel like they're in service to their needs when their needs have been presented. Like
Yeah,
they're deliberately going against it because the writer needs Dennis
need
to
you
do
to.
that.
Yeah,
Which
and I was like, and they did such a good job of setting it up that they needed that their needs are there, and it's like, oh yeah. So I'm like, okay, well maybe.
it
But
is, and what happens when Dennis and Mel have their little spat over the boat? Well, they go to the bar, and then
yeah,
Dennis gets drunk, and
yeah,
Nick has to take him home, and this is where Nick reluctantly reveals, oh yeah, he he robbed a bank truck and did some made a deal, did some time, and he's never, and that's about it. Like he doesn't want to talk anymore. And Dennis is
yeah,
super enamored by this. It's like, oh my god, that's great. Did you ever shoot anyone? He's like, no. Like, stop talking to me about this. And because Nick's embarrassed
yeah, and
about this, he
and he
doesn't
kind
like
of
it.
would be.
Yeah,
Yeah, and so you're even feeling more, and I'm like, all right, yeah, okay. Nick's the reason why I'm still reading this. I'm watching this,
yeah, because
and
he's
Dennis forced it out of him by trying to cause a wreck. So you're really just going, man, I just want to help Nick out.
yeah. Like you're empathizing more and more with him because he's literally got a horrible boss that he's now been thrown responsible for because he's drunk. and
Yeah.
he clearly doesn't like him anymore at this point. And then when his drunk boss reaches from behind the back seat and yanks the wheel into oncoming traffic just to coax his criminal past out of him, you're like, yeah, I like Nick way more than I like this Dennis guy. Screw Dennis, let him lose everything.
Yeah.
And so after we get that story, we jump back to the present, and Nick is freaking out, and then all of a sudden we hear two sets of gunshots muffled from somewhere on the ship, and Nick is freaked out, and he basically just runs to find out what happened. And
to give it credit, I was like, I want to know. I mean, you know what happened, but you're like, did Soren go get a gun, shoot Dennis? That was my first thought was, you're letting a guy go that you're holding hostage that you don't think there's going to be guns or some way of protecting themselves?
right.
Because I was thinking that, and I'm thinking, there's a 50-50 chance that Dennis is dead.
Yeah.
And then everything falls apart for Nick. And so at this point, I'm still like, I'm all in going, well, they set it up. That was the first thing I was thinking of. Somebody's going to, Soren's not going to run straight up there. Why would he? Well, apparently he did.
Apparently he did. And then and
that didn't happen yet.
when we don't know who's been shot, we then jump
Right.
back to the past, and this is where Dennis lays out his plan. And this is where I'm like, okay, Dennis is an actual moron. Because he's basically saying, I hear all the stories about the other fishermen boats all over the world, and how like the Somalis make a living literally just like hopping onto boats, holding them hostage, getting them to be paid. They send airplanes over that drop, millions of dollars in there. They've made like 60 million or 260 million in like a couple of years. And
Yep.
and Dennis is like, no, I would think to do that here on this side of the planet. And it's like, there's a reason. Like the Somali waters are mostly unprotected in the Atlantic Ocean, especially state size. Holy crap. There's a lot of protection going on here. You don't have those advantages here. And then on top of that, they think, well, we'll just get them at. So here's the part where I realized how badly they screwed up, because Dennis talks about how, and he brings up something that's kind of true, but he doesn't quite get the facts right. So for those of you that don't know, a little history, Canada and Russia have a dispute over essentially the North Sea, because there's so much water that is generally assumed to be part of your country so many miles out. Mm-hmm. And because Canada and Russia are so close together on the global side of things, especially when it comes to like where the North Pole is, there's some disputes over how much water is actually theirs versus how much water is ours. And some of our water has access to a lot of enriched oil, and some of their water doesn't, and they want that water. And so it's been a constant. This has been going on for decades. But as a result of that, there's not a whole lot of patrols going on there, because it's difficult waters to navigate. A lot of it is ice buildup, and you need icebreakers and whatnot. And I'm thinking, oh, are they doing like this long game here where they're going to follow one of the freighters through the actual Northwest Passage and get them there where they're the most vulnerable, where there's no real way to get other ships to them quickly enough? Mm-hmm. Are they going to do it there? No, they don't. They're literally only a couple of miles into international waters outside of Maine. Like they're so like they're nowhere near. I'm like, this is dumb.
And at least the boat he has could at least, well, it could make it. I wouldn't want to, but it could go out that far. But it would be risking everything to go out there and do that.
It would be, yeah. Like,
but you wouldn't think, yeah, I'm going to rob them. Right? Might as well be inside a land.
Well, the thing is, like at the Northwest Passage, you've got Victoria Island, you got Baffin Island. There's places you can set up there. It's harsh, but it's there.
Yeah.
And you can get a boat there, not easily.
There, store some gas.
Yeah.
I was really looking forward to, okay, the reason that they are flashbacking back and forth, and I'm doing the work for them, going, all right, we're going to see some pretty cool setup.
Right.
Maybe a pretty creative, because at my first, I liked the setup at the beginning, but two guys with handguns taking over a ship, I was like, all right, that was it. Okay, I'm accepting this, but now you have to explain it to me. And so that's what I thought the flashbacks were going to do, is build up a pretty creative heist plan. So I was like, okay,
And then
I'm
when we get
up
to the
for it.
heist plan, it's like non-existent, and this is actually kind of true to the characters, right? Which is
Right.
makes sense. It's like,
And it is, in all fairness, it is true to the characters. They bumble it through.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's the one thing I was like, well, because that's the big ask of like something like an Ocean's 11, right? You've got these career criminals who literally spend like a few $1 million to train and prep for a heist where they steal like tens of millions of dollars. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, why not just, if you got the
Yeah.
millions of dollars, if you got a couple $1 million, isn't that enough? Like, I mean, that's a lot of money. Even like when those movies were coming out,
Yeah.
people would be very grateful for that. But
Yeah.
the whole point of that is that it's greed, and that's what Dennis is basically saying. Like, even Nick is like, there's easier ways to get money, and Dennis is like, no, we're talking like money that's fu money, like go anywhere in the world money, and and that that appeals a little bit to Nick, because one of the things that he wants to do for his girlfriend is he wants to buy her a boat and somewhere that they can go sailing and live their lives wherever the waters take them or the winds take them. And you're like, wow, he's thinking about someone else. And Dennis is thinking about, I need to get out of this debt.
Yeah. That I put myself into.
Yeah, he's not even thinking
I
about
never
his
wanted
wife.
to do. Yeah.
And,
I'm not
and
going to take my wife's help. I'm just going to dig a hole for her too.
right. And then we get a little bit of backstory about how like he had a fight. Dennis had a fight with his dad, who is the fisherman, and they hadn't spoken. And then his job wasn't going so well wherever he was before. He gets a call that his dad has died, and he left him the boat and the business. And then he takes the opportunity because it's the only work he's got. And then he finds out, we don't know the details, but he finds out that the business is in debt, and he's got to find a way to crawl out of it. And then we go back to the freighter. So this vacillation between,
Yeah.
back and forth, it hurts the movie, even though some of the scenes by themselves are pretty solid. Like, they're very good on character. Like, I know who Dennis is by the 20-page mark, 100%.
Yeah.
And I empathize with Nick, and I want this guy Nick to come ahead somehow.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
but it's like, when I see these flashbacks, this just reminds me that the writer isn't confident enough telling the story in chronology, as it is, and even with the flashbacks, he's not doing something inventive with it to make that the most entertaining method of telling the story possible.
Yeah. It's, yeah, it's too often used to build tension between weak story, and everything so far just looks like it's solid story, so it doesn't seem like it needs it. So, he's able to set up some things that are the proper motivation and drive,
Mm-hmm.
and deliver some interest, like, because I didn't get that they were so incompetent at first. I was wanting them to be successful, and then you realize, no, they are incompetent. But of course they are. They're just amateur armed robbers. you know,
Right.
they're in over their head, and he did such a good job of setting all that up. You could tell this in linear order, and then you would have maybe with one flashback, the very
Right.
first, to set up where it's going. It's always in the back of your mind, and then let everything build up,
Mm-hmm.
and then go watch them do it. I think that's your movie.
I would too. Like,
would
again,
go ahead.
it's the first 30, 40 pages feels like television to me, because it feels like that type of NCIS,
Yeah.
procedural. Oh, we've got the opening teaser where this thing is happening. Then we cut to commercial and we come back. Oh, we're going back 6-7 days earlier.
Yeah.
Ugh. Okay, even for TV, it's cringe, but
Yeah.
TV does it so often that people are accustomed to it. So we're like, okay, we'll give you the benefit of the doubt.
They
Here,
can also do that over a full season and leave, a cliffhanger. Lost,
right?
give it all of its
Mhm.
credit. Its flashback meant something, whether it paid it off or not. You wanted to know what those people did before they all got on that island. That's the only successful flashback that I can think of.
Yeah, I think that's fair because
It was part of the story because here we are
mhm,
now. Okay, this is what everybody was doing before they got here. That's interesting. And then they added their twist of it's all related. That was a third level twist,
mhm,
and it was interesting in its own right. And then again, did they pay it off well enough? That's on them. But
yeah.
while you're watching it, you just wanted to understand it. And I think that's why they repeated it at the end because they didn't have anything.
Well, they knew they didn't have anything going through on that script because I saw the pilot. And I'm like, oh, they
Yeah.
don't know what they're doing, even though they know all the rules needed to get people hooked. I mean, first of all, you set up stage one. Okay, you have these people that survived a plane crash on an island. Okay, high stakes. Step two, let's elevate the stakes personally for each of them and do some flashbacks of these characters so that we see where they're going, what they're planning on doing, and why it's important for them to have taken this particular flight. And you're like, oh, great, now we got these layered stakes, and that makes layered depth of character, and that means we want to be invested in these people. But the plot isn't there. And as a
Yeah.
result, you're watching it for the characters, which is great, but the plot is all over the place. So what you've really got here is you've got essentially a Dungeons and Dragons campaign where the dungeon master has lost all their notes. And in this script here, well, there's definitely a direction to it. It's a very, very rocky first act.
Yes.
And I think it takes off quite a bit. Like, we stopped the flashbacks pretty much at this point, thank God.
Yes. I was taking notes on the flashbacks because I thought they were going to matter.
Hmm.
And I have my own personal opinions towards them. But, and then I was like, by the time they met, I was like, I had to take a break.
Yeah. But we finally returned back onto the freighter, and Nick has reached the bridge where he heard the gunshots, and the deckhand is there bleeding out, and he's pretty much dead.
Yeah.
And Dennis and the captain are gone. And we follow Dennis and the captain, and basically they've taken the lifeboat from the freighter, and they've taken off, leaving Nick alone on the boat with the rest of the crew hands. He may have a gun, a handgun, but he's clearly outnumbered. So all
Yeah.
it just takes is one brave guy to do something, and Nick is done for. And Nick is freaking out, and instead of staying with the boat, he's just like, screw it. He gets back into the raft that he was picked up on, and with a paddle, he paddles himself after the lifeboat, which has a little engine in it, and follows them. And I'm just like, okay, this is cool, because I don't even need the backstory. If you just did this straight, I'd be all in, because now you've got a guy who his partner's killed an innocent sailor. He's taken hostage the captain on a lifeboat, and now his other partner has left the boat on an inflatable raft with a paddle, and he's chasing after them. I'm like, that's cool.
Yeah. I mean, if that had been told linearly, chronologically,
Hmm.
you, I don't understand. It's better that way. It's just build up, and I'm more interested in watching him do that than any flashback. I don't care what that flashback tells me. I want to go back to that, and I don't think you should pull back to something that your audience is done with when they just want to get back and see that end, unless you just don't have anything to give them.
Yeah, pretty much. And
I want to ask you that on
yeah.
page 36 and page 37,
Hmm.
I still can't understand when Nick answers the phone. His phone's been ringing,
Right.
not just the company man calling the ship, but his phone was ringing, which I didn't catch at first.
Right. Yeah,
Nick
because
announced
girlfriend.
the words, but the voice is Julie's, send help.
Okay,
I
so this is actually okay. This is a transition point. So he's hearing Julie's voice, and it's giving him a flashback, but it's not actually her voice on the phone at that moment.
Okay, so did he answer the phone she was calling, or did he answer the phone the who did he answer?
He answered the ship's phone,
the ship's phone, but
and he
the
heard
voice he
"send
heard was
help" in
flashback.
Julie's voice, and then that triggered a
Okay.
memory of their conversation they had earlier, because that goes into another flashback.
Right. Okay. And see,
Yeah,
then that send help. You need help. That's where they use the same. Yeah. Okay. I can see that now. I can see that's where your experience comes along with this because I'm sitting there going, did she call him? I don't get this.
right.
You
No,
know,
no, I
he had a
completely
cell phone.
agree with you on that, because it's not properly done.
And why did
Um,
he say Nick mouths the words, but the voice is Julie's while he's
so he doesn't.
answering?
Yeah, so he grabs the phone, and instead of saying into the phone "send help," he just mouths the words, but he's
Uh,
hearing Julie's voice say "send help," because he's triggered to a memory where she says, "You need some help,"
and
and yeah,
that was the only one that had a transition point like that. All the rest were just
immediate, like just hard
instantaneous.
cuts. Yeah,
Yeah, and in a way, those are the ones that are forgivable because at least something that happened to the character triggered something and gives you an excuse to go back.
it does. No, 100%. And in this one here, it's a little off because we're phasing out of the flashbacks where we find out that Dennis is like, "I'm the guy in charge, but you're gonna do all the talking, Nick, because you've done this before." And Nick is like, okay, whatever." And
Yeah.
then he's back with Julie, and they're talking about how he's distracted. Like he is. This is the
He's
night
up.
before they're going to do the heist, and Julie's together with him, and he is just not responding, and she is freaking out because she needs him, and he's trying to be there for her, and he can't. And and then that's where we get the hard cut back again, where that's where Nick decides to get off the boat and go after Dennis and the captain and find out what the heck is going on.
Yep.
And and basically we kind of we bounce around with all these other characters where they're just kind of doing their thing, like, "Oh, we're going to go see Laurel, she's at the daycare, she's telling a story to the kids. Oh, we're then going to see Nick on the water where he's, getting exhausted, but he can see just barely in the distance the lifeboat still chugging along, and so he's not stopping, he's not giving up." And then
Yeah.
it's
Now
just
instead
back
of
and forth.
flashbacks,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, keep
So
going,
now
please.
instead of flashbacks, we're getting scene to scene,
Yeah.
but we're still following the same jump. And again, maybe that's the same thing, not confidence in the story that you're telling. Just
Yeah.
enough to stay with a character and
And
see
yeah,
where it's going.
and as Nick's paddling, he's thinking about like how the heck he got here. So we get another flashback with some character named Dugan, who I think is like Nick's friend, or at least a very close family member, who he's the guy that hands Nick the two guns, and he's talking
Yes.
about how Nick should just not do this and just take off. But Nick is kind of bought into a little bit of Dennis's plan and thinks that this might be what he needs.
And
And
there was an interesting line
mhm,
where Nick says to Dugan, "Oh, Dugan addresses. I've been hearing there's some kind of feud."
yeah,
Okay. Let's see. Sorry.
no, it's okay. Like, because it's a long conversation where Dugan talks about, "Hey, you don't even say hi or how I'm doing anymore. So what do you need? What's going on?" And Nick's kind of dodging it, saying everything's complicated.
Yeah,
And
and then Dugan says to him, "You tell him the only thing you ever stole is my time."
yeah,
Thought that was an odd line, and I'm like, okay, what does he mean by that? He knows what he needs to know, and that's where it ends.
and that's where it
I
ends. And
didn't mean to
this,
jump to the end, but I'm like that stuck out to me, especially on the second read.
oh yeah,
And
like because it's a deep line.
it's a deep line, and it's the end line.
Yep.
So it tells you there's something more, and if he's done his job correctly, you're going, okay, there's more to this. I want to know what that is. So
And it's a good setup because they actually do pay that off,
they do.
and it makes Nick's
Right,
character
like
even
that.
better.
Yeah, it makes Nick's character better, but on a strategy or writing or story, I didn't like it. And I'll that I plan on my end notes. you know, if it's a part we can talk about. But where they brought that up, it kind of opens a door.
Oh yeah, because this is now this is like this is proper mystery character mystery work.
Right.
Because it tells a lot, but at the same time it doesn't tell you right on the nose. And I appreciated that because I'm thinking, okay, this is some good development for Nick as a character. And then when we pick up with Nick, he actually ends up catching up to the lifeboat, which is just kind of like drifting around. And Dennis isn't inside anymore. And the captain is, but he's been tied up. Like his hands are tied, he's gagged, and he's also blindfolded. And
Yeah.
Nick immediately unties him. He doesn't remove the blindfold, but he unties him and he says he's sorry, and then he just gets back on the raft and basically just starts paddling towards land. And he has no idea where he's going.
Yeah, he could have left him high and dry. Now, at this point, do you think it was an attempt to make something Nick redeemable?
I think this was a good part to show that Nick's character is that he's not, even when he's desperate, he's not inhuman.
Yeah, yeah. So
And
I liked it for that. Again, does it pay off well or does it stay consistent?
yeah, like that's the question you have to ask yourself. I think for Nick, it kind of,
He's consistent to that point so far.
yeah, up to this point, he's consistent because there's a change. But the other part too is this setup, this situation where he finds the boat, the lifeboat, and the captain. It is established that this is where the Edna Rose was anchored, and it's not around anymore.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is we cut back to Tim, who he's on the
And
patrol.
he jumped into the water.
Yeah,
What did he swim to? Back to the raft?
yeah, he had to jump back into, yeah, because the raft was kind of, he couldn't anchor the raft, so it was floating away, so he had to
So,
swim to the raft.
however far he is away, that's one thing that's still on my mind going, okay, however far, I guess that's a good thing that they were as close as they were
Yeah,
to make this able to happen.
and to be fair, I was wondering like, okay, why doesn't Nick just take the lifeboat and go to shore? Instead
Yeah.
of seeing it here, it's like, oh wait, no, if he takes a lifeboat and someone sees him when he goes to shore,
Yep.
those are questions he can't answer. So what
Yep.
did is he left the captain blindfolded so he could get back on the raft and the captain could take the lifeboat wherever he needs to.
Yeah, and it isn't just to save the captain, but it does help because he's been blindfolded,
Hmm.
and they were wearing masks, so hopefully
Yeah, he
they've
can't
covered
really
their.
identify them only by their voice.
Yeah. So at least he's not cold blooded and go, well, push him in the water and say, I don't have to worry about you anymore.
Exactly.
And then he
And
could have still left the raft, but he just covered his track. So I liked that. I'm still on Nick's side,
mhm.
you know. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm still there. I'm liking Dennis a lot less.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, he just killed a guy and he left a captain somewhere to die on a boat.
His buddy and
And it's like, dude, you're horrible. And then
yeah,
you start hating him even more because we cut back to Tim, who has to file up some paperwork. And what does he do? Well, he leaves a voicemail to Dennis's home saying, "Hey, yeah, you're overdue on your fees, for on your permit here for
yep,
fishing in our waters, and if you don't pay up plus the penalty, we're gonna have to impound your boat." And his wife Laurel hears this message, and she's freaking out. And
yeah,
and then she calls Dennis on her phone, and Dennis is like, "Oh yeah, sorry I'm late. We're almost we're gonna stay out one more night, and then we'll be back early tomorrow." And she's like, "Yeah, but we just got a voicemail from at the harbor that overdue fees," and he's just flat out lying. It's like, "Oh, I paid that.
yeah.
There's nothing wrong. I'll take care of it, honey. No worries."
Their
And
paperwork error.
yeah, and it's like, okay. And then as soon as he hangs up the phone, he freaks out because he's like, son of a gun. And we find out that he's actually taken the safe from the captain's bridge quarters on his boat. So he's got the safe now, and there might be some money in there.
I did like how I was thinking, why didn't you just have him open it? But supposedly had written down instructions for it because at one point it said He looked at the paper in his hand, and it was illegible because of the water.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he took the photo, the
Well, it
family
wasn't
photo, and on the
it
back of it
wasn't
has the combination, and it washed
combination.
away. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. At
and
least it wasn't like complete incompetence.
and so and so here's the crazy thing. So Dennis, he comes back into port, he docks, and then he starts taking his tools to try and crack the combination, and and then we cut to Nick, who manages to get ashore. He deflates the raft. He takes off his survival suit. He bundles it all up and hides it in some rocks under some dirt and stuff. And he's got his regular plain clothes. And now he's basically like, I got to find a road because he has no idea where he is. He could be in a different country or a different state. He has no clue.
He's lucky he made land at all.
Oh, exactly. And so he's just wandering around, whatever he's trying to do, and then we find out that Dennis is still working on the safe, and then all of a sudden he shows up at the bar,
Yeah.
and he's like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna get some drinking done, and maybe I'll hear out and talk to Mel and say, yeah, I'll sell the boat." And Mel's like, "Well, okay, I can help arrange sell the boat, but whatever you get, I'm going to take what you owe me out of that." And Dennis is like, "Well, how much is that?" And Mel says, "Well, we can sell the boat for $5,000. Your cut is $250." Like, and you're like, "Holy cow, that's how much he owes him?"
And then I like how he says, "Can you advance me on that?"
Yeah, can you advance me the 250?
You might as well at that point.
And what does he do? He uses that money to go get drunk.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering, well, did he crack open the safe or not? Because he's left the boat, and he knows that it might be impounded, but he went to go get that to arrange for the selling of the boat and get the 250. So I'm thinking, oh well, if he's selling the boat, maybe he got the money. Well, not really spoilers because it's still in the middle of the script. He hasn't broken into the safe yet, so he's an idiot because he should have spent the entire night just trying to get into the safe, done everything, rushed home, grabbed any extra tools, take it back, do whatever he could. Yeah, take the safe home.
It's just as incriminating on his boat as it is at his house.
Exactly. Might as well just get the money.
Yeah, I mean, don't leave the job undone.
But he's an idiot who does leave it. He gets drunk. His wife has to pick him up, and then when he heads back to the dock, his boat's being trailered out of the water, and it's going to be impounded. And Tim and the police are not letting him get back on that boat to get the safe. And that's when you realize he cared more about getting that $250 and getting drunk than getting the money in the safe and possibly being able to get somewhat out of debt, or at least a chunk of it.
At least finish the job he was doing.
Right.
Right or wrong, at least finish one thing.
And I'm like, this is ridiculous, but it plays right into Dennis's characters that he brings it all on himself.
Yeah.
And then Nick, well, he's in the middle he finds the road, and he's hitchhiking as best he can. He's got his thumb out, and a young woman pulls up, and she entertains his story where his car broke down or what have you, and just needs a ride to the gas station. She offers to call a tow truck, and he's like, no, please don't. And then this is where we can kind of see the stress and the worry hit Nick, because he pulls out his gun and he carjacks the woman, kind of reluctantly, because she's kind of freaking out a little.
Yeah.
And then he just takes the car and he just bolts, and doesn't have a phone. No means to call anyone. He's got $5, a $5 bill, and then his girlfriend is kind of freaking out because
she hasn't seen him.
She hasn't seen him in a few days,
and she's confronted Dennis about it, and Dennis is blowing it off as I think he went to go get some beers.
Yeah, like we went drinking and I hadn't seen him since, and
she wanted to call the cops, and he's like, No, don't do that. You'll just, I mean, I don't know if he said it, but I read into it. He's like, he's an ex-con. You want to call the cops?
Yeah.
There's
something going on there.
Call the cops because she wants to. Anybody else would. But then there's that, oh, he's an ex-con. You know, you want to bring that kind of heat into your life, you know? Want them investigating you guys?
Yeah, and this is now we're starting to get into like Fargo territory, but without the comedy.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Unless
Because
they play funny music while they're trying to rob the freighter ship.
exactly, it's pretty dark. But essentially, what ends up happening is like, well, first Dennis gets super upset at Tim again. Julie decides to go to the cops, and this is where we get introduced to Barbara Cullinane, who is the late 50s detective on duty. And
Wasn't that a little? How do you feel about being introduced to a new character? I mean, it's
this late into the story.
yeah. I mean, it's necessity because
Mm-hmm.
this is when she gets the call. But what would you have done differently? Because that is just way too late. She's not just a random character.
Yeah,
Just
like
like
usually what I would do is I'd make that character a patron at like the restaurant and bar that everybody goes to. And
yeah.
give her a
So at least
couple
the
lines
name
to
came
introduce
up.
herself into commentary and whatnot.
Yeah. Okay.
Because
Because
that's just how you do it. Because now you've got this, this sort of Damocles hanging over there. You got Dennis who's down on his luck and he's thinking about committing a crime, and the sheriff or the detective knows who he is because they frequent the same restaurant, and maybe she's someone who's like, well, I can take him to the drunk tank or we can drive him home. I'll do
you
what's
could have
less
done so many
paperwork.
little things.
Yeah,
Right. She could have been the one that called at any time. But I kind of
exactly.
think they wanted to protect that character and make her a super efficient detective. I got that impression.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm wrong. They didn't just want it to be somebody relatable. The only motive I could come up with was why they didn't bring this character in at the very beginning, give them something menial to do, or at least humanize them. Now they're all business, you know.
Yeah, they're.
It's almost like they're a machine.
I mean, this
Fill
technique
in the
kind of can work, but we're bringing a new character with now a new point of view and a new narrative that we're going to be following with them. And this Barbara, like she reads Julie right off the bat. Like she notices the subtle tracks on her arms. She questions whether this her boyfriend Nick is, back into crime or whatnot, because she's heard the stories that he has a record, but she hasn't properly checked
right.
into his background yet. But now she's going to, and we find out from Julie that yeah, she used to be an addict, but she's like over a year sober, so she's doing well. Everything is good. She's got a job. She's got a home. She's staying out of trouble. She's just concerned for her boyfriend, whom you can really tell in this scene how much she loves Nick.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh man, I hope Nick makes it back to her, but he's already, he's made one big mistake, and that is he's carjacked a young woman and left her in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. And what? There's no mask at this point.
Yeah, like she may have been able to see his face even though it was night.
He left her phone.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, there you're starting to go, okay, it's going to unwind fast for him.
It really is. And so, Julie's freaking out because it's been in one more day. Dennis has come back, and it's been another day, and Nick hasn't shown up. And Dennis is still lying to Laurel that he's going to work every day. And I'm like, okay, so he left the house to pretend to go to work. His boat's impounded. We don't have any scenes with him going to the impound. So what was he doing that entire day? Like that's the question that I was raising, because this is where I think the screenplay starts to actually, like, the cracks start to get wider.
Yes, because there's a lot of stuff that happens off screen that needed to happen, and maybe they were feeling tight on time.
Yes.
But it's like, yeah, you can't be that smooth and flowing or detailed and then just start jumping into it happened, trust me.
Pretty much. And then we get this beat where Laurel decides to see Dennis at work. Like, so she drives to the harbor, and where where the Edna Rose is usually docked, there's nothing there. And when she asks Tim about it, he tells her the truth. He's like, oh yeah, we had to tow that boat. And she's like, what? Why? And he says, "Oh yeah, delinquent permits, all that type of stuff." She's like, "No, we
Did
took
that?
care of that. He told me he took care of that. I had a cop come to me this morning to talk about Nick because no one's seen him. And did you see him?" And he's like, "No." Tim says, "No. Dennis came in alone. He said his deckmate was sick or something." And so now we have two different stories that Dennis has told people about
And
Nick.
Julie knows he's lying to at least one of them, or
Right.
both.
And now Laurel is like, "Well, what the heck is
Laurel,
going
I'm
on?"
sorry.
Yeah,
Laurel.
like she's completely confused.
Yeah.
And it's like it's a shift in narrative now, because now we're a little bit more focused on Laurel when she finally goes down to confront Dennis. Obviously, there's a huge fight, and this is the one time where I'm like, I have to roll back a little bit, because when she talks to Tim about all this issues and she's realized that there's these secrets that Dennis has been hiding, she essentially says, "Hey, can you take me to the boat in the impound? I want to see what's going on." And Dennis kind of bends the rules and lets her go in. And
Yeah.
she finds all of these bills, these past due bills. She finds out that Dennis has taken a second mortgage out on the house. And
Yep.
and she just takes all of that. She doesn't really notice the safe, but she does take all the other paperwork, and she just throws it at Dennis's feet and says, "What the heck is going on here?" And all Dennis says is, "Oh, I'm working on getting the book back. I have a plan." And she's just like, "What's the plan? Like, you got nothing." It's so crazy. And she's sharing all of her pent up emotions and how much she's been trusting him, and that everything will work out, and it's only gotten worse and worse and worse. And then she basically says, "Where's Nick?" And Dennis just takes off. Doesn't care. Yeah. And she's like, on crying, and she collapses on the floor, just completely mortified that their life is in ruin, and how she's like, it's a miracle we have the power and water running up at this point, given how much in debt they are. And this pairs up nicely to everything we've seen of Dennis before, because whenever he gets his money, what does he do with it? He gambles it, and then whatever he has left over, he spends on booze for himself.
Yep.
And now we're seeing like Laurel being completely victim of that behavior, to the point where like whatever money she's making at the daycare is literally what they've been using to stay, not necessarily ahead, but at least
day to day.
Day to day, yeah. And then like that's the other part too. So a lot of this stuff has, and then this happened next. Like for Dennis' part, there's cause and effect, but it doesn't feel like a strong cause and effect. It just feels like, oh, and now we go to this part, and now we go to this part. Especially with Nick here, where when we come back to him, he finds the convenience store and gas station. He wants to make a phone call, ideally call Dennis and figure out what's going on, but he only has $5, and the clerk won't give him change. So he's like, two options: can I borrow the store phone and make a call, or can you break this and give me change? And the clerk says, "All right, fine, I'll let you do the store phone," and he does. And after a couple of failed attempts calling Dennis, who keeps blocking the number because he doesn't know it, he finally gets into contact with Nick, and Nick just lays into Dennis, saying like, "You killed that guy. What the heck are you doing? Everything is off." And Dennis is just like, "It's all your fault," because you're like, none of this would have been happening if you did what I told you to do, and if your girlfriend didn't report you missing. And Nick is freaking out, rightfully so, because he's still not even 100% sure where he is at this point.
Yeah. And the one thing I thought was a little weird was they had a payphone. He wouldn't break the money. He wouldn't break. I don't know why you wouldn't break it. I also don't know why you wouldn't buy a candy bar. And then it leads into, oh, I was caught on a security guard. But all you're doing, or a security camera.
Right.
But all you're doing is making a phone call.
Yeah, so you're fine.
So I didn't understand where the problem is there. other than it needed to happen.
Well, yeah, here's the other part too, right? So this is where I think the writer lost focus on what Nick's backstory was. Because Nick is reported missing. He finds out he's reported missing, and then he realizes that he's on security camera at this gas station in the middle of nowhere. I think what the writer was trying to do is trying to convey through subtext that Nick realizes, oh, if he's reported on this security camera and he's so far away from town, maybe, and we know that he didn't show up with Dennis when he returned from their overnights, maybe the authorities will piece together that Nick was part of what's also been reported on the news as the attempted hijacking of that freighter off the coast. So
Yes.
that's what I think the writer is trying to convey, but I don't think he did it effectively well because of the fact that, Nick's just this random guy at this gas station for whatever reason.
What would you even think? Yeah.
Exactly.
But we obviously, yeah.
And
the writer knows the problem he's got to solve. So, but yeah, it did not convey that at all.
No, I don't think it did. In fact, it only made things, I think it made people think, at first it made me think this, and it probably made you think this, is that, oh, whatever Nick did in the past that got him jail time, if he's seen on a camera at a convenience store after having gone missing a couple of days, that might raise suspicions and cause an investigation into him, which might eventually lead back to the freighter heist attempt. It's to me, when I'm looking it over and when I was reading it and when I was thinking about it, I'm like, this is kind of convoluted, because if he just returned the phone and went back into the car and then drove back to town, there probably wouldn't have been an issue.
That tape would have been recorded over before anybody even thought twice about it.
Or in the case of this one here, it's recorded onto like the cloud, so it goes onto a server, and it's nobody's seeing it. But
it's not like they're going to gas station and
go to the gas station, use the phone, and leave. Like it's nothing. But Nick does this stupid thing, which I think is also out of character for him, where he basically points the gun at the clerk and says, "Get rid of the tape, delete the tape, whatever." And the clerk's like, "I can't. One, I don't have the password. Two, it's on a cloud server, so it's already there." And Nick is now, I just pointed this gun at this guy. So what does he do? He's like, okay, well, empty the register, and he takes candy and he takes the money and he just hightails it out of there and commits to the robbery, which he didn't really have to do anyways. And you're like, oh, dude, this is just you're forcing Nick into this situation to behave in a way that he otherwise wouldn't behave at this point. And I get the context is the fact that, he's stranded somewhere and he's desperate. But
and maybe it's his past that's doing this, but we don't know that.
Yeah, maybe it's his past that's doing this. But again, there's a reveal that happens later where you're like, oh, well, that kind of betrays this scene.
Yeah, deflates the whole balloon everywhere.
It really does. And eventually, we find out that Tim's kind of keeping an eye on Dennis, because Tim has started to piece together that Dennis has been acting strange, and him working for the harbor front, he's obviously heard the reports of someone attempting to hijack that freighter, and that it's two guys that tried to do it. And he strongly suspects that when Dennis and the Edna Rose left, Nick was aboard, and when Dennis came back, Nick was not there. And that something went wrong, and he just has a spider sense about it. So he's kind of parked outside Dennis's house watching, and Dennis catches this and he freaks out, and he just drags Tim from out of his car and just pummels him. And
they tried to pay that off in different ways later on down the script, but he just beats the crap out of him. What are you doing here?
Pretty much. And this is kind of like the change moment for Tim, because Tim realizes, I shouldn't have done that, but I felt like I needed to. I'm not an investigator, and there's a reason why. And his boss, Debbie, another character that's introduced, is telling him, like, just get some ice on that. Take it easy. Stop doing these types of things. You know what your job is. Just do your job. Don't go beyond that. Keep your nose clean.
You should have applied for the Coast Guard, and I did. And, it's almost like, okay, was Tim supposed to be a character? Was he or
You're right.
is he just doing what needs to happen to make something else happen? Because if he's supposed to be a character, I mean, they've established that he gets, I mean, in their words, he cowers away from a confrontation where he's just doing his job. I did like the joke where he said, "This is the second time I've had somebody throw money at me." And Debbie goes, "Well, maybe you're in the wrong line of work." I like that. That made
That's
me
a good
laugh.
joke. Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought, well, okay, that's not enough to have this character. I mean, what is he? Is he just a replacement?
I think he's a facilitator. He's the character that facilitates the bridge from between beats, and you
Yeah.
don't want to waste a character on that.
Yeah, or at least develop his character and then just have that character do that. But that's all he does is facilitate the next. Yeah, like you said, facilitated between beats. And it just was glaring by this point that there was nothing to him other than he needed to do and say things to move things forward.
Yeah, and that's such a waste of time and screenplay real estate
Yeah.
for that. And and after that scene, after Dennis beats the hell out of Tim, Nick returns to town and shows up, and that freaks Dennis out. And then these two guys have an argument, and it just makes you hate Dennis more, and it makes you question what the heck you're gonna do with Nick. And Dennis is like, well, we gotta figure out something. Like, you gotta lay low, and I'm gonna figure something out. And Dennis is reluctantly stuck having to trust him because he's been away for a couple of days. And his first course of action, and this is where we kind of get Nick back on course with his character, is that he goes to see his girlfriend. And of course, she's super upset with him. And he kind of leans into the lie that Dennis said, which is like, yeah, I got drunk and then I woke up in the woods and it took me a while to get back. And she doesn't buy it, which is hysterical.
Yeah.
But it's so weird because the writing style, it's consistent, but the tone and the subtext changes between what Nick is doing and what Dennis is doing and what Tim is doing. And it feels like there's a second voice coming in and out here that's pulling the story in one direction and instead of letting the characters kind of do what they need to do to meet their goals and letting the story follow that, because Nick is stuck between this point where he's lying to Julie to protect her from the screw up that he did with Dennis. Because if he tells her the truth, she could be somehow implicated, even though she had nothing to do with it. Either way, she's compromised, and because of her past as an addict, the police aren't going to care about the context of that, and neither are the district attorneys or anything.
And they are definitely codependent on each other.
Oh yeah, because she's like ready to break her sobriety because while he was gone, she purchased some drugs and she hasn't used them yet, but was really close. And Nick is like, you got to get rid of that stuff. I got to go lay low, and I will be back, and that's basically that's it for those two together for that point. And then we cut back to Cullinane, the detective, and she's, going through her paperwork and stuff, listening to the news. And all of a sudden, that security footage of Nick robbing the convenience store plays on the TV. And Barbara looks at it closely. She's like, holy crap, that's the Nick guy. That's where he's been. We're going to go and see if we're going to go to Julie's apartment. We're going to see if he's shown up there. And that's what they do. They're about to knock that door down with a battering ram. And Julie's hearing the knock on the door that the police are there, and she's got the drugs on the table. And you're like, okay, this is a cool scene because, she's got the temptation there. She's told to get rid of it. Nick just left moments ago. Police are at her door. So she goes and she throws it, hides it in the garbage disposal, opens the door right before they crash it, break it down. And then they search her place. They don't find the drugs, but Julie now knows where Nick has been and what he did. And she is mortified. She is just, I can't believe it. He's not here. I need him. You don't understand. And if he does come back, I'll call you. And this is where we kind of find out from. No, this is not where it is because we're getting close. Because this is a 121-page script. We haven't gotten to the spoiler cutoff point yet, but what we understand is that Kalain knows more about what's going on with Nick than anyone else in town, and Nick has reconnected with Dennis, and their entire thing is like, okay, we're basically gonna break back into the impound, break into the safe, steal what's in it, and then go our separate ways. And Nick is like, I don't know how the heck we're gonna do that. and Dennis is like, it's okay, I got a plan. And this is where we get into like this comedy of errors part where it's not funny, but it's just ridiculous because Nick is the one that's Dennis is the one that thinks he's got everything all set and done, and he's like, oh yeah, I cased the place. You know, there's only one guy manning this place at a time, and even when they start getting ready to go do something, you find out that the place is actually swarming with security and guards, so they can't do anything.
Yeah, and Nick notices Dennis is gonna kill him.
That comes right after the fact. Yeah, when he's like, okay, well, we're heading back. Like Dennis is like, you can lay low in my shed, and because he realizes, okay, we can't do this today. I'll have to come back another time. You still need to lay low. You lay low in my shed. Here's a sweater I've got for you to keep you warm. And he's hiding his gun in it. And while this is all happening and they're driving back home, Tim shows up to the house and apologizes to Laurel for everything. And so yeah, they're just kind of having like a moment together. They're not attracted to each other or anything. They're just, upset and concerned, and they're both trying to make sense of what the heck's going on with Dennis. And Dennis doesn't see this happening when he arrives home, but he's guiding Nick to the shed, and he's about to basically pull the gun and take Nick out when he sees Dennis is inside his house. And he's freaking out because he's like, what the heck is going on here? Why is there something deeper going on? He was outside of my house in his car. Now he's inside my house talking to my wife. He manages to, like, before Nick even realizes what's going on, but he kind of gets the idea that he's probably going to be taken out. Dennis locks the shed door and latches it shut, trapping Nick inside, and then he just bursts into his home and then puts the gun up against Tim's head and starts threatening him. And it's crazy. It's this intense scene, and this is actually where Tim kind of goes through a change where it's almost like he's kind of given up and he's ready to go, but he's also speaking honestly
for the first time.
Like he's
standing up for himself.
Yeah.
And what's right. And that's such a waste because he's not even really...
He's not much of a character. This is like his fourth scene in the entire movie.
He's a part of another. You could combine a character, I think.
Maybe, yeah.
I don't know how to fix it, but you got to stop all these partial characters and make one of them be that. I'm all fine with Tim being there, but it's like the way it came across was really weird and jarring. Because, like, why do I need to know Tim is finally standing up for himself? Is it Tim's movie? Nick's movie? Dennis's movie?
Yeah.
Julie?
Yeah, it's like who is it really? Like who is our protagonist that we want to follow and root for? I'm of the mind that it's Nick, but he's not strong enough or active enough to really hold that role. And Dennis is clearly the antagonist, but he's got a lot of attention on him, and he's definitely he's an idiot, but I can see actors being attracted to this role because it's kind of got some juicy moments to it, especially his like descent into madness type of deal. But
that's going to be funner to play.
But like, after Tim, says, he basically admits, like, I know what you've done, and it's only a matter of time before someone else figures it out too. You can pull the trigger, but it's over. At the end of the day, it's over. And Dennis just like says, to heck with both of you. He storms out. And as he does, he realizes that Nick broke out of his shed. So now he's like, great, I got this loose end to tie up again. And so this is where we get something that's really kind of another contrived point, right? And that is Julie. Nick goes back to Julie's. He grabs some stuff. He tells her how much he loves her, that he's gonna solve this. He's gonna reach out to her shortly, and he's gonna get her a real boat one day. And he just needs to leave for a while. And the moment he leaves, Dennis kind of shows up at Julie's with a gun, just as a policeman is patrolling the area and notices Dennis kind of entering the home.
Yeah,
and he
sees a dark shadow. He's not even looking for Dennis.
Yeah, he's not looking for Dennis. He just sees
Maybe
this.
He's looking for Nick, but he just happens to be there.
He just happens to be there, and he sees someone rushing into the building in a manner that doesn't look normal. Like it's not like he's rushing in there because he has to go to the bathroom. He's not carrying anything for delivery, like he's late. He's just rushing into the building, and that the cop has some reason to follow through with that. And it's a good thing he did, because Dennis kind of breaks into the apartment, pulls a gun on Julie, and is demanding, like, I want to know where Nick is. Tell me where Nick is. And we cut to Nick is actually managed to break into the impound by having stolen Dennis's truck to do so. So he's now implicating Dennis even more. And he manages to get away from the security guard that's there. He gets into the boat. He manages to find the safe, but he doesn't have enough time because it's being surrounded. He's slowly being surrounded by the police.
Out at the guy.
Yeah, he's throwing crap at the guy. But Nick does something really clever here, and that is while he's hearing the cops come to surround him, he ends up latching the trailer that the boat is on to his truck, and then he just drives the boat out of the impound lot, and now we're in a high-speed chase. And while that's going on, the cop comes into Julie's apartment and orders Dennis to put down the gun. And Dennis is now arrested for essentially, what looks like attempted murder, or at least threatening with a deadly weapon to Julie. And we get this cool set piece where Nick is in the truck. They don't know, the cops have no idea who's in the truck, but they just know that they've stolen the Edna Rose, and he's driving around. And as this is kind of going down, and it's a long set piece, but it's not finished yet, because it's kind of how do I want to say this? We get this interesting hanging Chad moment, because we're getting ready to close to spoiler territories, but there's a scene after that's not a spoiler that's actually really good. But essentially, Nick is basically outrunning the cops with the boat trailer in tow. And I'm going to leave it on that point for Nick's story, because we can do something with what Dennis is doing now that he's in the police department being interviewed.
Yeah.
And then that's probably what we'll let it off. But so Dennis is getting interviewed by Cullinane, the detective, and she's, asking him basic questions like, where'd you get the gun? And Dennis is like, do I need a lawyer? It's like, if you want, but it won't be much good. We're not charging you with anything. And this confuses Dennis, because Cullinane says, well, the officer entered the residence without a warrant, which, even if this were like Maine,
you saw something suspicious. You actually
had probable cause. And then on top of that, you also have evidence to confirm that the probable cause was correct. Like,
yes,
warrant or not, he did the right thing.
Yeah, it's not a stretch that he was there looking for Nick and thinking it's Nick. Okay, comes across the guy, but he's still there with a gun. Yeah, those circumstances back up the police officer.
Exactly. So that part to me felt like this was written a long time ago. Yeah. And this is the first time that it kind of made it through, because even then you'd probably bring up body cam footage, because all cops in the United States have them now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
So even in small towns, so even like Cullinane, she basically says the only reason you're still here is that the ballistics from the gun we got off you match 4 shots that were in the shipmate that was killed on this hijacked freighter. And lo and behold, there's 4 bullets missing from your gun that should be there if you've never fired it before. And Dennis is saying, oh, it's not mine. And he's not asking any things. And oh, no, it's not mine. It's his deckhand's. And she's just like, okay, what's the name? It's like Nick Silva. She's like, oh, yeah, that rings a bell. It was his residence where we found you, right? And he's like, sure. And it's a good scene because she's like asking, well, what were you doing there? Just talking? And she's like, well, with a gun? And he's like, if you say so.
Yeah. I did like the exchange.
No, it's a really good exchange, and then we get to the payoff to what Dugan said to Nick earlier, which is that Dennis tries to throw Nick under the bus and says, you know, he was there's rumors that he's a criminal, and she says, no, we checked him out. He's not a criminal. He's clean. He's no priors, no outstanding. He's never been arrested, never been charged with a crime in his life. Nothing, not even a speeding ticket. And you find out that whatever Nick was involved with, it wasn't him that, like, we have to infer this based on the clues up to this point. Whatever Nick was involved with, he wasn't caught. And it seems more like Dugan was the guy that took the fall. To help Nick out. So, like, Nick made a mistake. Dugan stepped in, took the fall. Nick was able to do what he did, but the rumor that he was involved kind of clung to him even though he wasn't convicted, and that's what's been causing him grief for the past few years.
Yes. And this is the moment, if I had a stack of papers in my hand, I'd throw them up in the air and walk away.
Yes. But
because on one hand, I like it. The way you described it is best.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all built on that.
Yeah. And it's a piece of it's a piece of dramatic irony that's lost the irony part of it.
Yes. And I think if you're going to do that the only way I think to fix it is Nick feels bad. Dugan took the time for him.
Mm-hmm.
And he is spending the rest of and Dugan basically saying, you're not cut out for this, or protecting him.
Mm-hmm.
And he feels guilty. So in a way, he's acting like an ex-con. He's not taking jobs. He's sabotaging his own life. And he's doing all those things, but tell us that. It doesn't need to be a surprise at the end. Make that the story. Make that part of Nick's story. And it could come at the end. But without it, why can't he get a job?
Exactly. It's almost like Nick has self-imposed this guilty verdict on him because the state didn't do so. And so whenever he applies for something and they ask him, oh, have you ever been a convicted criminal? You come to the understanding of like, yeah, he probably said he did even though he didn't. He wasn't convicted. Yeah. And that's what's been causing the reputation. And this is all speculation because unfortunately it's not part of the script itself.
Yeah, I mean, you put out a better description than the script did. The script just said he's clean.
Yeah.
Good night, go to bed.
Pretty much.
And it's like, oh, I lost it at that moment because I'm like, well, then why did anybody do anything? Why is Nick even there?
Yeah, like Nick has that clean slate. He should be able to take advantage of that favor that Dugan, that sacrifice that Dugan gave to him to have the life that Dugan wanted him to have. And instead, I think it goes to the honesty of Nick's character and the fact that he did commit the crime. Even though he wasn't punished for it, he should face some punishment for it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I'd rather have that set up at the start.
Right. Make that be the flashbacks. Tie that into the flashbacks that you find out later that he did do the time. You know, part of the conversation is, you know, I didn't take the fall so you could get out or so you could go back to crime. You know, when he's there buying guns, he could have said, all he had to say was, I didn't take the fall for this, so you'd be free.
Yeah.
So you could just jump right back into it.
Yeah, like
Dugan does care about him, says you're not cut out for this.
Oh yeah, he says tell him to pull the ripcord to get away as fast as possible. I mean, that would be one thing that would be useful, Another method would be if, and this would be a change to Dennis's character, but that would be if Dennis said, I hired you even though you're an ex-con, but I still did a background check because I have to file the paperwork. And lo and behold, I learned that you never served time. So what the heck are you telling me that you were convicted? And that's how you get coax the story of what Nick did out of him. As opposed to being the drunk guy, Dennis drunk in the back of the seat, causing a near accident by grabbing the wheel. Is basically Nick saying, listen, I actually did the thing, but, a family friend was there as well. He took the fall. I got away, but I'm the one that did it, and I'm the one that screwed up, and I'm the one that deserves the punishment, not him. And then that's where Dennis is like, well, since you know how to do this and you also got away, and maybe you could help me with my plan. Yeah. And it's like, that's a better meshing of those ideas. But
it doesn't weaken Dennis either to do it that way.
Yeah. But you mentioned something before the show that's actually part of this scene, and I want to throw it over to you because it's Cullinane's story about lobsters and how Dennis is a lobster fisherman. So take it away because you had some interesting thoughts on this.
All right, I'm looking for the exact page that's on.
It's like 110, I think.
Sorry, I'm scrolling down.
Yeah, no worries. It's a long script.
I should have wrote down what page it was at. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, and Cullinane was interesting because she wasn't just there.
Mm-hmm.
She is a big part of the last act. Let's see.
Because she just refers to Dennis as like just a lobsterman, and then says, there's something that's always confused me, and then take it away, sir.
Yeah, there's something that's always confused me. Every time I go to eat, there's no. Okay, she talks about how expensive lobster is,
mm-hmm.
and then and he says, "What's so confusing about that?" And she says, "Well, it confuses me because they're basically bottom feeders, scavengers. They eat garbage, whatever everybody else left behind, whatever shit floats down from the top."
Mm-hmm.
And I hear they'll even eat each other without a moment's hesitation. Isn't that why you put the rubber bands on their claws? And then just refers that they're vicious to each other. And then she says, little do they know they're about to be boiled alive. Mm-hmm. I like Dennis's line right after it says, something tells me you're a vegetarian. That was funny, but that's not the point I was wanting to make. I thought that, in my mind, that line right there and the whole existence of Cullinane was to make that line and to tie the people in this story and relate them to the bottom feeders like lobster. They'll turn on each other because every exchange Dennis and
Nick,
and Nick had they were going to tear each other apart. There at the end, they were going to kill each other. And I thought that was the whole point. That was the point the writer was wanting to tell with this script. In my mind, mm-hmm. They wanted to just draw that allegory or whatever to what the fishermen are fishing is what they are becoming, or at least that's what they are.
Yeah.
But in a way, I kind of was like, the writer didn't have a lot of. Did they like his characters? Was it fun to make these people do these horrific things? Can you write a good script, or does it fall apart because you just want to see him suffer so much?
Yeah, like that. Those are the questions I had for this because, like, this is the cutoff now. Anything after this is spoiler territory because there is some little like twists.
Yeah,
but it felt like only this is the point where the writer kind of realized what the theme he was going for.
Yes,
and even though there's little bits of it kind of presented throughout the story, there's so much other stuff being injected in that kind of takes you off course for that. Because really, it's a story about Dennis's self-destructive behavior coming home to roost, and I there's a slight cultural difference here between Canada and the United States because when I was in college, like I would get part-time jobs everywhere I could, and I even worked for a restaurant. And one of the things I learned is that lobster was really cheap to buy, but crab was really expensive, and and my friends, colleagues who work in the United States, and in some parts, especially in like Washington State or in New England, they would sometimes say like that was the opposite, where crab was a little bit cheaper, but lobster was really expensive. And I was like, oh, that's kind of fascinating here, because what Cullinane says here is that, yeah, they are a scavenger crustacean, right? Like, you know, they're you can find lots of them, and they have some value to it. But when you take a look at their habits compared to other animals, they are bottom feeders. So why do we place so much value on catching them, right? Like, that's a good question to raise. And I just thought, okay, that's kind of interesting here. But I also find that like there's a disconnect, because the title of this script is Sea Dogs, and they're lobster fishermen, and I'm thinking, well, I've never heard of sea dogs being associated with lobster fishermen. Is that the case? And I hope anyone listening out there has some information on that they can share in the future about that, because
I thought Sea Dog would be like the nickname for an old fisherman.
That would be my understanding. But this guy, Dennis, he's not an old fisherman. He may have grown up with it, but he left.
He left it.
And then his dad was a sea dog, essentially, because his dad lived it and passed away as one. And then he kind of took up the mantle reluctantly because he had nothing else. And Nick wasn't a sea dog at all. This is his first job he's done in years. And
all he wanted to do was get a boat.
Yeah, just get a boat and sail away with his girlfriend.
And that would make sense. That would give him an ex-con working in an unpleasant job. Maybe he just wanted to get experience on the sea.
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe he felt like there's more freedom in the water than there is on land.
Yeah.
So yeah, like there's some ambiguity to this script, and I think also a lack of focus, which, you know, as we've been discussing it, and there's lots to discuss, I'm reflecting on our conversation. I'm thinking this really could just have been a 90-minute script. It didn't have to be a 2-hour script.
Yeah.
Because there's stuff in there that we just didn't need to see. I'm thinking, like, because you said, oh, Tim, we could combine him to another character. I'm thinking, well, Tim and Mel could be one character.
Yeah.
You know, the guy runs a bar, but he's a harborfront guard by day, and he's helping out his friend. But, you know, not only does Dennis owe him a lot of money, but he's also not paid his permit fee. So he's, you know, reluctantly says, dude, I have to tow you. Like, and there's nothing I can do. I've been holding them off for months, but this is it. This is the line, and you haven't delivered. And every time you do sell me the lobsters that I sell in my restaurant, you burn it on a poker game, even when I tell you I don't want you playing, or any of that type of stuff, right? Like, you got to kind of tighten it down. And so I'll throw it back to you, Jake. This script, was this a green light or a pass?
It's a pass.
Mm-hmm.
It could be fixed. I think the writers, it's not okay. If it's anything, it's the story, or maybe the first half got repolished and the second half didn't. Maybe took some notes or some direction from someone else, or it evolved from a different story. The character and the characters working with each other and interacting with each other's, the main characters, was great. And it was all the way up until, well, really when the script needed to start to end, that it started to fall apart. And things needed to happen. So, no, it's a pass. It definitely could be fixed. I guess I just wanted to say good things about it as well.
Oh, sure,
Visually, I would just get rid of the flashback. Don't need it.
Right.
You could build all the tension you needed. One flashback, and that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I concur with that, because even though I really liked the Nick character, this is a pass for me, because I think the gas station holdup scene was a little out of character for Nick at this point. It felt a little contrived. I liked the fact that Dennis is the antagonist who is spiraling out of control, but I think a lot of the things that he does is stupid, mostly for the sake of being stupid, as opposed to, like, get me inside the logic of the fool, right? Like, that's how that's what I appreciate about some of those heist films where the heist is supposed to go wrong. It's because the guy plans it out well and he gives a convincing argument as to how well it will work, to the point where you're like, okay, I understand this. And then when the obstacle faces through, you as the audience have that fun revelation where you're like, oh, he forgot to think about this one thing, and now everything is going to unravel. And now you realize, okay, he is an idiot, but he was at least trying. Where here, Dennis is an idiot, and he also doesn't try.
Yeah.
So I couldn't really get on board with him. So yeah, this is a pass for me too. And I will say this, like, last week's script was way better, and it was ranked further down on the list with the same amount of votes. This one here shouldn't be so high comparatively. So yeah, this is a double pass for us today. And yeah, so those are basically my thoughts. Is there any follow-up thoughts you have, Jake, that maybe we glossed over?
Yeah, you know what? My one thing is I did notice every character, their last interaction with Dennis was their point where they were cut free and their lives began to get better.
Right.
Laurel, Tim, when they stood up to him, their lives, that's the moment they took it. Julie, that's when she stopped doing drugs.
Right.
Cullinane, I mean, I can't really talk about the other stuff, but even at the end, he didn't. Well, I can't say.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's almost like Dennis was a vehicle of, I guess I would call it maybe an audience participated struggle session on a character like Dennis.
Right.
We got to watch the struggle so everyone else could grow rather than Dennis grow. And I guess there was a lot of, the reason I bring that up is because everything seemed focused or coming from Dennis, but the external stuff was attacking him as well. And I'm like, I don't know if I like that or didn't like that, but it kind of feels like so many movies. I like, never make things easier on your characters.
Yeah.
Okay. But it doesn't need to be a struggle session because it's not entertaining for the audience. None of us want to watch that unless that person grows or we can grow by observing it.
No, and I think that's to do with the fact that Dennis is the antagonist, and the suffering he brings upon himself has that ripple effect on the people around him.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess I did like that's where people, but it was almost like instead of a character, he was a vehicle.
Yeah, I got that. Yeah, like he has some character to him, but he had more function as a plot device than as a character because,
but
again,
he is the main character in a way. So maybe switch it definitively to Nick and then let him be the vehicle for that. But that's just kind of a thought that's been bouncing around in my head. But
yeah, I think Nick should have been more of the focal point of the character. In this case here, this strikes me a little bit as like early amateur writings where they said, hey, let's tell a story from the perspective of the supervillain or what have you. And you can do that, but it still comes down to the fact that you have to give us a convincing argument as to why we have to follow them over the hero and empathize with their struggle and also relish in the fact that they're the bad guy. And maybe even like tempt the audience into rooting for the bad guy, like, because that's the other part too. Because audiences kind of like being challenged in that regard, especially when you have earned that big ask at the beginning of the story, where they're like, "Okay, you want me to follow this person who I should normally hate, but for some reason I like. He's kind of charming. He's kind of interesting. Kind of like Jack Nicholson's character in The Departed. You hate the guy, but you also want to keep watching him, type of thing." So yeah, that's kind of the trick that you got to pull off here. And unfortunately, like first-time writers, like I don't know a first-time writer that's ever pulled that off, but I do know a lot of veteran writers that have.
It almost seems like it'd be a good assignment for a first-time writer, not something to actually make.
Right.
Thinking outside the box rather than, okay, write a script based this way.
Yeah. Yeah,
More
like
as an
like get it
exercise.
out of your system to experiment with it, and then get some notes from people, but like push it to
Right.
the side just to kind of get it out, and then go back to the normal various formulas, whether it's the hero's journey, whether it's a chase movie, quest, any other types of general plots where you kind of keep things a little bit more safe in regards to formula, but you spice it up with the interesting types of characters, to the point where when you understand the formula and then you start really understanding how characters interact and work, that's when you can kind of spin it on the head and go, okay, now let's do this from the villain perspective or the antagonist perspective or what have you.
Yeah.
Though those it takes practice for that, because you have to prove yourself in the success of something reliable before you can actually take the risk and experiment.
Yeah.
And that's the hard it's a hard lesson. Like whether you're a mechanic, right? It's like, oh, how do you build an engine for let's say a classic '76 Mustang? Well, first you have to make sure you have all the right parts and they're put in the right order and they're fastened in the correct way. You can't just wing it and do it in a different way. There's a procedure that's required. Otherwise, you might risk the car not working, which should be the favorable aspect of that, or blowing up because you screwed up something with how the feed from the gas tank pipes into the engine.
Yeah. Tearing apart something to see how it works doesn't necessarily gain you everything unless you have the skills to repair it.
Right. And also follow the instructions to put it back together exactly
Yeah.
as required. Once you
Yeah.
learn all that stuff and you're like, oh, okay. And then that's where you get to that expert level where, you're driving along, you hear a sound in the engine and it's like, oh, well, I've rebuilt this engine so many times. I know exactly what that sound means. I don't even have to look at it. I know what the problem is.
Yes.
That's the level of expertise as a screenwriter you need to be when it comes to story, whether you're watching it and whether you're reading a script.
Yeah.
So, dude, this has been a great conversation, Jake. I see that we have Adega Outlaw donated $4.99 with the message late fee. Very funny, sir. There's no cause for being late at any time. Always happy to have people participate here. Remember, everyone, whether you're listening to the show live or listening on Patreon, if you leave a comment on the video or even a comment on the announcement of what our script will be, the script we'll be reading for the following week, we will read them in this section of the show. It's always appreciated to help with the support that goes towards expanding and continuing the show as it is. Jake, thank you so much for coming back. It's always a pleasure. You always have some great thoughts and interesting takes, and I love how you as an audience member and a movie lover are learning this part of production and film. It's always great getting your thoughts on these.
Well, thank you. It is. It makes watching movies. It puts an interesting and it adds to the entertainment for me.
Yeah, well, that's great.
And
Yeah,
the respect that it really takes for these writers. I mean, even to write a bad script takes skill.
it takes skill. Exactly.
Even get a script read. So,
Mm-hmm.
so sometimes I feel like a fraud even talking about it, but I'm just offering my opinion. I have nothing but respect for these people who are out there writing these scripts, push them forward to create something. Nothing but respect.
Oh, and there's never any doubt of that, and there's nothing fraudulent about what you're doing because, whether you're a writer, whether you're an audience member, whether you're in any other type of trade, you're someone who might enjoy or have something to say about a piece of art, whether it's a book, whether it's a movie, a television show, what have you, any medium you have that you want to invest your time or money in to be entertained or to be engaged and stimulate some thoughts that you might have not thought about before. You have to exercise that participation on everyone's end, like whether someone in the industry does it or whether you, a guy that I'd be pitching my movie to and hopefully wanting to have you watch and get satisfaction out of. That opinion always matters because that's part of the growth, the exchange, the unwritten conversation between the storyteller and the person listening.
Yeah.
So I always appreciate having you here.
Well, thank you.
Gonna have you back. I'm gonna try and have you back at least 2 more times before the end of the year because We've only got 11 shows left before the year's out, and then we're back to 2025 and the next volley of blacklist scripts and any other scripts that have come across my way that are interesting. So
I look forward to it.
I'm looking forward to it as well, sir. I want to thank everyone out there listening, whether it's live or on the replay. Always appreciate your support. To my Canadian friends, have a wonderful Thanksgiving. I also believe Columbus Day is coming up for you guys, right? Or has it already passed? Huh? Jake?
Oh, sorry.
No,
I
it's
thought
okay.
you said you Columbia. No, Thanksgiving, Columbus Day.
Columbus Day is
I
Monday, right? Yeah?
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay, yeah.
I have my own business. We don't do our vacation. I never, I don't get to take the vacations. So the holidays, unless it's Christmas or I never pay attention to them because I'm always working anyway.
Oh, no, I get that too, yes.
Oh, I never know, except for my wife's a school teacher and like, oh, what are you doing home? Oh, okay. So
So that,
I
yeah, she's your
never know.
calendar for you.
Yeah.
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 So yes. For my Canadian brethren, it's our Harvest Fest Thanksgiving Day weekend. For my American brothers and sisters, happy Columbus Day. Have a wonderful holiday weekend, and never forget, guys, when it comes to great story, it all starts with the script.